So welcome to you and to Paula and Alan and Graham, and a warm welcome to
Thank you.
everybody who has already joined us in this session titled From Classrooms to Auditoriums, Addressing Application Anxiety. I think that this is a very timely topic because students worldwide really struggle with raising application stress, uncertainty, and pressure, not only from the universities, but also from their parents, from their peers, from themselves as well. And today, our fantastic panel going to discuss these issues consists of Alan Sheptin, who is an independent educational consultant and a founder of Sheptin Tutoring Group in the States. Paula Lamel, who is the college counselor of St. Francis College in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We also have Ana Blas, who is the general manager of Collegiate AC, which is a leading student accommodation provider. And we also got Graham Wise, the senior international officer in the University of Essex in the UK. So not to waste any more time, we've got quite a few issues to discuss. Let's dive in straight. I have prepared questions that are for all of you, and some of them are just for any personal to each one of you. I'm gonna name you when I want a particular person to reply. So basically, the row of replies, I'm gonna start ladies first, Paula and Anna, then followed by Alan and Graham. I think that's fair. Some questions would be strictly for the counselors, some strictly for Anna or for Graham. The first question I think is for all of you, and that is, what do you think are the greatest stress factors for students when applying to universities? What stresses students the most? Paula settles this with the internet. Anna,
Uh,
can you start?
yeah, thank you for having me in this conference. From my point of view, as I'm not like I'm not working at university, but I'm working on student accommodation. What I can tell in this sense is that as we know that it's a very stressful for students, the university application. How can the accommodation or the residence helps in all this process? I think that is very important that all of us, university colleagues and all the student service providers that be like together, that can collaborate and cooperate all together to make this process to the student like easiest. And also for us, it's very important to accompany them as a person and not just like a future student university.
Thank you, Anna. Let's try Paula again, whether her internet would be better now.
Sorry, I hope now everything's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the things that my students usually start thinking is that, am I going to be alone? Am I going to be in a new environment and I don't know everyone? What should I do? Because it's like it's like a turning point in which they are going to become adults. So am I going to be on my own? Because they are coming from a time that students spend most of their times in the same school, in the same environment, in the same neighborhood, and suddenly they are moving to a different country, a different institution. They are going to live alone, hours and a lot of miles away from their family. So this is the first thing that they usually start freaking out. And it's not about grades, it's more about how am I going to become this autonomous person, this autonomous adult. So I don't know how to do that. I didn't learn how to do that. So this is one of the things that my students usually make comments with me.
So basically, it's the feeling of loneliness, being a bit lost to be on your own. Yeah. Alan, would you agree with this? Is this something that you notice with your students, or are their stress factors different?
I think the stress factors are different. I'm going to talk about from a US perspective. So first of all, the cost of American universities is just going through the roof. So private universities now are, some of them are approaching $100,000 a year, and you're talking about a 4-year education. And there's so much uncertainty around what our federal government is doing with respect to loans and financial aid, and how endowments are going to be taxed here in the United States that could affect financial aid packages going forward. I think the big issue is the way that American colleges and universities evaluate students, which is called holistic review, which they look at the whole student. So it's hard to predict who gets in and why they get in. So for instance, you have a school, let's say like Harvard, which has about 2.5% acceptance rate. You have a high performing student who wants to apply to this school. And the student says, well, I'll be the one to get in because I have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and even H and I as well. And they don't get in. But someone else in their school gets in with A, B, C, D, and E, and they say, well, why did they get in and why did I not get in? And the process is extremely opaque. The other thing that makes things, I think, more complicated is, as an independent consultant, part of my job is to expose students to different colleges and universities, not only here, but abroad. So when I get a parent and a student coming in to discuss this, one of the things I like to approach is, would you consider looking at schools outside the United States? And I'd say 9 times out of 10, the parents say no. And the concern is it's so far away. My response always is, well, if you're looking to send a kid from New York to California, what's the difference between sending a kid to New York to California than New York to England? And then the last thing is testing. So we have something called the SATs and the ACTs in the United States. And during the pandemic season, testing became optional. Schools are slowly bringing it back into the fold. And what we're noticing now is some universities, even though they're saying their test's optional, they're really saying test implied. So I just went to a conference last 2 weeks ago, and they're saying there's some schools that your chance of getting into the school if you submit scores could be as high as 10 times higher than if you don't submit scores. So there's so many factors in applying to US universities that can be very overwhelming to students and parents.
Thank you, Alan. I'm definitely going to go back to the requirements of the universities in a bit, but let's first hear it from Graham and his point of view.
Yeah, so I'd say there's many stresses and kind of fits in nicely from what Alan's just saying. So for myself, working for a UK university, often those stresses, exactly as Alan said, will be relocating. Am I going to be welcome? Am I going to be accepted as an international student studying in the UK? So that's often a big stress. I think when it comes to, if we're looking at the application admissions process, there are some stresses there as well for students. One thing that I often find is the delay in finding an answer to a question or to finding a results to their application. Maybe they've applied to a scholarship, maybe they've applied to housing, maybe just applied to the university or the college itself, and they've just not heard back for a long period of time, and that can cause a lot of undue stress as well. So yeah, keeping things nice and brief, I would say the time it takes to get a response back can often be quite a big stressor to a student. And then, like I said, and to reiterate Alan's points previously, being a UK-based school is that stress of the uncertainty of moving to maybe a whole new country, a whole new continent they've maybe never visited before, and everything comes with that culturally as well can be a bit of a challenge to students. So there's a lot of things to weigh up. But yeah, that'd be kind of my answer to that question.
Thank you. And because all 4 of you actually mentioned the relocation part, I couldn't help but actually turn to Anna, who, as a person working with Collegiate AC, helping students to find accommodation. Anna, what is your point of view? Do you think that having this kind of service actually is something that releases the students a little bit of stress?
I agree. Of course, in the sense of student accommodation, it's different from a university, I mean, but I agree, of course.
Always easy to have something, prepared in your hands.
Do you mean in the sense of student accommodation to
Yeah,
prepare before they came to visit like the residents?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, from our point of view, what we try to offer in all the senses, provide and offer like guide and resource. Is just to provide maybe such accommodation webinars, guides to help the students to decide what kind of environment they need, and also to reduce the stress. We also facilitate all the visits to the property, and always we are focusing in the conversation with the students to reduce all this stress on this lack of information at some point.
Thank you. And
I don't know if I have answered to your question. Sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Alan, you mentioned all these requirements, and sometimes the lack of a specific requirement that stresses students. So I want to ask Paula, for your students, what is the part of the admission process that they find the most stressful?
I think in the beginning when they are trying to find the best university for them, because there are this kind of thought that students have about, I am supposed to apply for such and such university. These universities are my dream university, but it's because of their names. And sometimes students don't understand that although this and that university might have a strong name, it might not be the best choice for them in regards to their learning style, in regards to what they prefer, if they prefer to live in a big city, if they prefer to live in a small city, if they like big campus, if they like a small campus, if they prefer lecture style classes, if they prefer small groups, lessons, more practical approach. So sometimes students, they don't consider that. And when you start questioning them about that, they get lost, or specifically when they are searching for an area. So I usually have my students ask, I would like to apply for business. Okay, but which type of business? Which kind of orientation of business would you like to apply? And they give me back the question as, is there more than one type of business, miss? Yes, there is. So, and it's related to the type of university we're applying. So they notice that they are just making a choice without making the right questions for the university. So it's not only about the money, it's not only about the requirements in relation to grades, SAT, CVs, personal statement, but how the university is going to be the best fit for the student style, for the student life project.
Thank you for this. And Graham, from your university representative's perspective, what do you think university can adjust, realistically speaking, to make the whole application process a little bit more student friendly?
Yeah, I think transparency is clear. I think it's really important to be upfront with students as to what we require from them, whether it is English language tests, whether it is which grades they need to achieve at their college or their high school. I think that's really important. I think from a university, obviously, it's my role to kind of advise to students looking to study in the UK. I think it's important to be present as well. For us, our role is to help and guide students along that process the same way that it is for a counsellor. And that's what we're there to do. But sometimes it's difficult to find that person who can answer those questions about the scholarships, the finances, the housing. So I think it's really important to be present, to be transparent. What we do as a university, what we like to do is we'll run kind of regular drop-in sessions where students can really informally chat to us, because that's the other aspect that we're kind of struggling is that we are a presence there and we are there to support students, but at the same time, sometimes students don't engage until it's really late in the process and they're kind of stressing and worrying about all the things they haven't done yet because they've just not researched or reached out yet. So while it is important for us to be present, it's also important for the students to really engage with those services, and that could be via the counsellor, In that move, it could also be via reaching out to the university representatives as well. So I think it's important to be transparent upfront, tell students exactly what they need to achieve, and essentially be there for them along that process in the most accessible way possible. Because sometimes, and maybe people here might find out with their students that they don't want to come and chat to us face to face or face to face virtually. Sometimes it can be messaging, WhatsApp, live chat, that kind of stuff as well. So it's about being present, but in a way that suits those students as well. So they're kind of some of the challenges that we face.
I like your reference to transparency because I'm gonna go back to this in a bit. But first, I wanted to ask actually the counselors, Alan, what do you think should be, as I asked already, um, a realistic way of changing a little bit the application process in a way to help students?
I don't think there's really much that can be done here in the United States. If I could rule the world here, what I would love to see are a couple things. First of all, I'd like to see more transparency. So these are the grades we really want to see. I would also want, we have here in the United States, most schools give either an offer of admission, an offer of rejection, or what I call limbo, which is a waiting list. I would rather schools say either, yes, we want you, or no, I'm really sorry, we don't want you. Because I think that middle ground, the wait list, just kids really pine a lot of hope on it. And if you look at the statistics, a lot of schools have very, very low acceptance rates off of the wait list. There's some that move the wait list pretty quickly, but the ones who are the high rejective, low acceptance, they'll put thousands on the wait list, maybe take 3 kids.
Thank you. And Paula, what about you? What do you think can be changed to make the process more friendly?
I totally agree with Ellen because we have the situation in which, because of criteria is not clear, students don't know exactly what. It comes to the students that it becomes personal, because sometimes students, they have an outstanding curriculum, they have an outstanding performance, and they apply for different universities, they apply for different places around the world, and then they got accepted in university, for example, in the Russell Group in the UK, but they got rejected in the Ivy League in the USA, or the other way around. So students don't understand what is happening, and it always comes to them like, am I not good enough? Should I have done something else? Why am I good for one university and I am not good for the other? So for them, they did their best, so they take it personally as if they weren't good enough for that. So they start doubting themselves. Even after getting a place in an outstanding university, they still think there is something wrong with them. They don't look at the good part, they don't look at the acceptance, they look to the rejections.
You know, the other day, while the previous in conference was ongoing, another counselor mentioned pretty much the same as you, but she also added that she's seeing all these, posts on social media from her counselors, colleagues who are, saying my students got accepted here, my students got accepted there. And then she said, I felt what students were feeling, because I was also thinking, why is my student not accepted at this university, but this person's student is accepted? What have they done differently? So she touched upon on this topic of, how counselors actually feel, which made me think about next e-conference and a topic on counselors' mental health. But Alan, I think you wanted to add in something.
Well, first of all, I always tell my students they're not accepting a piece of paper. They're not rejecting you, and it's always a business decision. Schools have to realize they have to have a certain demographic, they have to have certain people doing certain subjects, certain academic interests, certain social interests. And it's very interesting when you talk to my students a year later, when they don't get into top tier school or the number one school, they say, I couldn't imagine myself anywhere else but this school. So I'd say 9 times out of 10, it works out the way they want. And I tell them my story because I got rejected from the school that I really wanted to go to. And I explain how the place that I ended up going to, what it did for me. So I always say, be careful what you wish for.
And I want to get back to this topic of transparency and talk a little bit about misinformation, which also includes the topic of accommodation. So I wanted to ask, and first I would like to start with Anna. Anna, how do you think that schools, universities, and accommodation providers like you can work together to provide more clear, more consistent, and timely information to applicants?
Yeah, I think as I have mentioned before that it's a process that we should be like together. By now, we have see that there are many students accommodation provider, and we understand that. So at the beginning, I think that the universities give like many information or many suggestions to the students. So which accommodation provider can they choose or something like that. But nowadays, we have already seen like many students, like many universities, at least in Madrid, are not like very committed to provide this information about accommodation because we are many of us and we understand, and it's very difficult that they, as I said before, they get like committed to offer like any kind of information about us. And I think that this is also like an stressful factor because it can be easier, but as we are many, I know it's like difficult, and it should be something that it's like and factor stressors for students and parents because they see that they are coming to another country or maybe it's the same, but they don't have like the whole photo and they don't have like the whole information. And I think that if we collaborate together and that we are allowed maybe to give some information to the university or some paper, something like that, it will be easier for them and we can help a lot, of course, in this sense.
I'm one of these people who are studying in the Netherlands in the past and have experienced
Yeah.
the problems with accommodation myself, and I really know how stressful this can be, both attending lectures and still not having, your place to live in. And that can
Yeah.
really spoil your whole study process once at university. So Graham, back to you. Same question. How do you think it's possible for schools and universities and accommodation providers to work together to ease this process and make it a bit less stressful for students?
Yeah, I think definitely there is a possibility to do that. It needs to be a joined up process. It needs to be a very much a unified thing between the university and the housing provider, if that's the route that university goes down. What I'd say in the UK and being suited to the UK is that it's not so much of as an issue. I know in the Netherlands it can often be an issue in recent years. Many students I've spoken to have gone there have faced similar issues. Here in the UK, and especially where I work, we have an abundance of accommodation, and it's very clear, it's very upfront in terms of what students need to do to be able to achieve their on-campus accommodation. Essentially applying by a date. If they do that, they're sorted. Year 1, year 2, year 3, they've got their housing sorted. So in the UK, I would say it's definitely something that we really do pride ourselves on, our housing situation. There's, like I said, there's a real wide variety of it, which definitely from when I often will speak to students in North, South, and Central America, and when I talk them through the offering that we have here in the UK, the private rooms, they're guaranteed if you apply by a certain date, you can stay at your same room throughout your degree. It's really popular, and you can, when you speak to a student, you can see that weight just gets lifted off because it's really important. Obviously, the main reason they're studying their degree is their subject, but housing has got to come almost a close second. That's where you're going to be spending a lot of your time. And if you're not living in the right place, it is going to massively affect your studies. Like I said, and I was mentioning parents as well, it's going to be a huge factor for them as well. So having that clear and in place and knowing what they can definitely get is vitally important. What we do as a university, we will run online sessions with our accommodation team who go through all of the options available to students, how they apply, the costs, any extra hidden costs that you might not know about, just so everything is there on, black and white for them to see, to view, to digest, and then to make an informed decision. So that's what we try to do as a university, because like I said, we recruit students from all around the world. Getting the right home for them is so vital. So that's why we really put a lot of effort into that. So I think that kind of, again, transparent approach, joint up approach, to be clear and concise to students is really important when it comes to housing, because it is massively important throughout the 3 or 4 years that they're going to be studying their degree.
You mentioned parents, and I also want to move to the topic of parents, because when I was preparing the session's topics, one counselor said, "Oh, parents are the biggest stress factor for students." So, so I was not laughing right away. So I want to move a little bit to this topic of the parents and their influence on over students, and how schools and universities can, partner to deal with the parents. So, Alan, tell me, in your experience, to what extent are parents a factor for the stress of the students? And can you share one or two case studies from your work?
How about for this? How about for the counselors? They're the biggest stress factors for us. To be very honest with you, I think when I work with students, one of the big issues is, because I'm independent, I'm paid by the parents, they feel like that I should be available 24/7. Part of it is that the parents don't realize that the university that they went to 30 years ago has gotten exponentially more selective than it was when they went to school. So they think, oh, my child is brighter and has more stuff to bring to the table than I did when I was 17 years old. So my child should definitely get in. And the rules have really changed. And that's kind of frustrating for them. I think also for parents, the stressor is what I call the cocktail party conversation. My child goes to such and such school, and it's almost like a reflection on their ability to parent. I think that makes things extremely stressful for the kid and for the counselor and for the family. So I really wish that parents would look more at what a school could do for their student, what is the best fit for their child, and not the brand.
I liked how you mentioned this, the cocktail party conversation. And I think it's the same type of peer pressure. Students have the peer pressure about where they would go, but parents also have this type of peer pressure, exactly showing them whether they're good parents or no.
It's very interesting. What I see a lot of times on Facebook, parents will say, we got into blah, blah, blah school. And it's almost like a badge of their self-worth. And I always retort, I write something every year in my blog, we did not get into school, your child got in, you pay for the school. So I think it's important for them to be able to differentiate that. The other thing that's becoming really big here in the United States, I don't know if you see this in other countries, are called bed parties. And where a parent will deck out a child's bed with all sorts of swag from that university, and they'll post it all over the place. It's almost like they get a little bit too involved in the process for their kid. Again, it's that badge of honor, the thing that I could talk about at the cocktail party, what I could put the thing I could put in the back of my car, the sweatshirt that I'm going to wear all the time to show that my child goes to, Oxford or Harvard or wherever have you. So I think the parents need to tone it down a little bit.
I understand this. Paula, your view on this matter with the parents.
I have different situations. I have this kind of parents that Alan is mentioning. So you have the expectation of the parents firsthand, and they just ignore asking and forget about asking their children what they want, what is best for them. Yeah. We also have the situation in which there is a lot of misinformation. So lack of knowledge of the university, lack of knowledge of other possibilities. And sometimes it comes to the lack of knowledge of their own child. Because if they knew their own child and what they need, they would not force them to apply to, they would not have this expectation of them applying to one university or the other university. So and we also have that kind of situation, because if we consider, I'm from Brazil, everything is more expensive for us because of the difference in the in dollars or pounds or euros. So our parents usually say to the kids, we are going to spend a lot of money on that. So it needs to be a very good university. Otherwise, I'm not going to pay for you to go outside the country. You are going to be here. So, and I also have situation in which I have parents with more than one child, and the parents say to the oldest, be careful with the money you are going to spend, because you are going to split the money between you and your brother or you and your sister. So they need to make their choice considering the amount of money they are going to spend. So we know that parents, they go with the best intention, but sometimes they don't have they are not full aware of what they are really doing to their children. So they are putting on more stress on them, because uh, kids don't want to make their parents ashamed. They want to be they want their parents to be proud of them. So instead of focusing on getting better grades, choosing a university that is going to be the best fit, they are worried about making their family happy. So this is really complicated.
This is something that Marcia, one of our ICs from Brazil, has touched upon in a comment in the chat, and I'm going to go back to this comment. But first, I wanted to move on to Anna and Graham and out a little bit the question about the parents for them. And I would like to ask you, how do you form the connection with the parents, especially those parents who are so stressed that they need to be in touch with you, and how do you keep it going? Let's start with Anna.
Okay. Alan has said that we need to be, I want to start with this, like 24/7 for them. And I can agree more, because they have these kind of expectations. Their child are gonna study in another country. How are they going to be in this residence? So as close we can be from the parents is gonna be better at some point. And it's also important, as Paula said, to manage like the parents' expectations through all this process, and to be always available for them, to provide like emotional and practical support. For example, many parents, even some students, of course, contact us even before they have like the admission letter. So our team needs to offers like a clear, empathetic, and close advice, resolving all the doubts that they can have before coming here, and even at some point something that is related to the university. But we can make some research, and we can offer that service that they maybe need, just to feel like confident with us that their child are gonna be okay with us. And just at some point it can be even enough that they trust us. So I think the key is to accompany them even before they arrived.
Thank you, Anna. And Graham, how about you? How you form the connections with parents and sustain them?
Yeah, so I'd say firstly, from a university perspective, often the counsellors and maybe some of the counsellors that are here today will deal with those parents maybe sometimes more than I do. So sometimes I don't either get the pain or the blessing of dealing with them. But for the parents that I do engage with, I think it's really important to kind of tailor that conversation to what their specific need is. So often I'll be engaging with students and talking about the student life and the questions that a student will have, whereas for a parent their focus is going to be very much switched. It might be focusing, again, if we're looking at studying in the UK, it might be looking at the housing situation, it might be looking more on student visas, employability, is it safe on campus? Is it safe in the city that I'm going to? So for me, it's about kind of switching that conversation to gear towards what matters most to a parent. To be there to help answer their questions, to support them when they need it. Often it's that you'll either get all or nothing. I find when it comes to parents is that you won't hear from them and it will be just the students, or you'll get a parent and they'll be having this and all these different questions. And often in the UK, those questions will be around our processes. There's a lot of differences between the US and the UK and the other countries as well in terms of application processes, and various things like that. So addressing those concerns, and then also to be in a way with parents to not make them feel as if they're asking stupid questions, because it can be a totally alien. If their kid has never gone to the UK before, they've never known anyone who has done that, then that whole process is completely alien to them. And it's about kind of making that as user friendly and as easy as possible. So yeah, we'll do that. I'll have calls with parents. What we're also trialing this year is doing a parent specific webinar. So we're just focusing on inviting students. The webinar is just for the parents of our offer holders to kind of go through those questions regarding, is it going to be safe on the campus for them? How do they go through that visa process in the UK? What does healthcare look like in the UK? How do I open up a bank account? Those things that as a student, you might just kind of brush past and be like, I just can't wait to play for the sports team. I can't wait to start my degree and live in this new country. So we're doing things like that to try and address those concerns, because it is really important. They're one of the biggest driving forces behind a student, as pretty much everyone here will know. So yeah, it's about being personable and essentially, making sure the chain of communication that we have with them is geared towards them and what matters most to them.
Thank you, Graham. I'm actually a bit jealous of these students whose parents are so into their process. I don't think that my parents even realized what I was going through while living in the Netherlands and studying there. But these were back in the times where you hear your parents once a week on the phone and that's it. One thing I'd like to discuss is there is this moment where during students being very confident before applying to universities and being very proactive, and then during the process they got a little bit frozen and paralyzed. Alan, have you had these cases of, let's call it, application perfectionism and paralysis, when a student just doesn't know what else they're doing and where they're going?
I think with respect to the application, there's a lot of back and forth when we're writing personal statements. And the stressor is it perfect? And I had an interesting situation about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I had a student who was not a very good writer and not a very expressive student. And we figured out a story that I thought was very good. It really kind of showed the student's empathy. It showed his heart. And we put together the essay. It was good. And the next day I got an essay from the student and he said, I rewrote the essay last night. What do you think? And it sounded nothing like the student. I mean, the voice was completely different. And the father is in public relations and he's a writer. So I knew the father wrote it. I wasn't going to say, I know your dad did this, and you're not sending this. Instead, what I did was I said to the parent, I said to the parent, we need to talk. And I said, I want you to understand something, that sometimes universities will ask guidance counselors to see writing samples of the student. And if it's inconsistent with the way the student writes in the school, it's going to raise a red flag. I didn't say anything about it. Wasn't accusatory, nothing. They got the message. Then I had another student 2 years ago who was absolutely terrific. Young lady from rural New Hampshire, and she was Indian, and she grew up in a basically all-white community. And she went to a Catholic school, and she wrote her essay about her identity as being Indian, how she was embarrassed by it. And the essay she wrote about, one day she was on the school ground when she was a little girl, and another little girl went up to her and said, why is your skin poop colored? It was an amazing essay. Her guidance counselor didn't like it, and she wanted to write about how she wanted to be a doctor and how she loved medicine. It was the most perfunctory essay I read, and I said, I don't want you sending this. And the guidance counselor made her send the other essay, and she was getting rejected from schools that I thought she should have gotten into. And I think it was because of the essay. So there is a lot of stress around it because it's that push me, pull you between a seasoned consultant and a guidance counselor who really maybe doesn't understand the process as well.
I can hear your pain, so to say, in your voice about this student. Paula,
Great.
have you? Yeah, go
This
ahead.
young lady is terrific, and she's at a top university. She's pre-med. She's loving school. She didn't get into her top choice school, but she loves where she ended up. Same thing. As I said before, she blooms where she's planted, and she said, I can't imagine myself anywhere else.
Paula, have you had a similar case? Have you experienced this perfectionism paralysis in a student?
Students usually they come with the idea that they need to have the perfect personal statement. They need to have the perfect CV. And as they start listening to many people, for example, the private counselor, the school counselor, the psychologist, their parents, sometimes they don't make space to listen to themselves. So, and this is when authenticity comes. So sometimes they are listening to so many things, they are having so much influence that they are trying to make what is the best, what is the perfect, and as they are trying to reach many expectations at the same time, they are not reaching their own expectation to feel they are satisfied. So this is really complicated when you have many people dealing with a student. So sometimes I have this kind of students that they do not know exactly what to do. And I have also another situation of paralysis in which I have students that they have a private counselor. Sometimes the private counselor don't know them as students, so they don't know exactly their grades, their trajectory. Sometimes they are special needs students, and students usually they say, I want to go to such and such university, and because of the grades they have, they start guiding the students to have a pathway in which they need sometimes to change the school to achieve a grade. Sometimes they need to study more, to do more than what they can do. It's not because they are not good enough, but because sometimes university is not the best fit, or it's not in their possibility because of their grades, and it was constructed later on. So there is always someone that needs to stop sugarcoating them and give them a cold shower, because sometimes you need to tell them they are not going to get to that place they dreamed, because they had unfortunately a not very well grounded orientation on that. So when they get to understand they are not going to get the final, they are not going to get that predicted grade, they actually needed to get to that place, they just freak out, they don't know what to do, they think it's too late, and sometimes it is. So it's really complicated when you have this situation, and unfortunately I have this situation a lot.
Fortunately, well, it's the stress of the students. I have a question for Anna and Graham, and I'm going to start with Anna. Anna, you also have a type of an application process and you have an interview stage, if I have understood correctly. Have you experienced with the student this moment of freezing stress when actually applying for accommodation and when you're talking to him, to that student?
Yeah, professional paralysis is not something that affects as like direct, because these perfectionist paralysis are most rely to follow the focus profession to complete the application to the university, but at some point when they came, they feel like the same, like they are afraid if they are not going to consider like the proper students to be in our residence. And for us, it has been really difficult because this is totally the otherwise. What we try to do is that this paralysis that they feel at some point, they need to forget, because what we need or what we want to do is like to create an environment that they feel like totally different, to stay with another students, to give them like the supports and the authentic interaction that they need, and also to make like real friendships. All of this helps them to forget what is happening with their university application, and we can help in the sense also with our social networks, doing like community activities, so they can reinforce if they aren't sure at some point, they can reinforce and they can talk to another student that are also feeling the same. So when we have this kind of situation, as we consider that we are like a big community, all of us can help it at any point, as we have said before, like 24/7.
It's very nice to hear, and it perfectly fits with our topic of the conference this year.
Yeah.
Graham, from your point of view, from coming from a university, I bet you have received this type of essays that might not be written by the student, but by the parent or a counselor or somebody else. But what do you think the reason for this is? Why would you think a student would actually go to someone else to write their personal statement rather than do it on their own?
I think there can be quite a few factors. I think a lack of confidence. I think students may see, and it's not so much in the UK, and in other countries, you have your acceptance rates. It's going to be so difficult to get in. I'm not going to be able to get my spot. So that creates a lack of confidence, maybe a lack of self-belief in students in that, you know what, I'm not going to be good enough. And in a way, it's not about being good enough. It's about showcasing your passion, showcasing you as a student and you as a person and what you want to do. In the UK, our statements are slightly different. It's all focused around the academics, you know, why a student wants to study, what they want to do, what they want to do in the future, less so that kind of story of them as a person. So I always tell students when it comes to writing that essay, if they're thinking about, oh, I might get some help to do it or get someone else to do it, well, it's a personal statement, and the clue is the name is personal to you as a student. So from a student's perspective and the advice that I would give them, it's about really drilling down, going back to basics, is why you want to study this chosen program. You know, where does that underlying passion come from? What skills and experiences you have that will make you the excellent student on that program, and where do you want it to take you? And someone else can't write that for you. No one will really deep down know why you want to study this program and what you want to do in the future, because it is personal to you. So I can understand why students might go down that approach. I think it's the pressure, it's the lack of confidence, but that's where it's the role of the counsellor, whether that's the high school counsellor, the independent counsellor, or someone from the university to kind of clearly explain to that student that, well, you know, it needs to be done yourself. And going back to the point Alan has said earlier, you know, the universities, we receive many thousands of personal statements every year, and we can see through them. And if your course involves an interview, often that statement will be used as the basis of that interview. And if you've not written it, then that interview is going to be a real struggle. So it's really important that it's the student's own work. But I think it comes from that real lack of self-confidence, lack of self-belief, and that pressure to get where they need to get, which is told to them by their peers, their friends, their family, and what people have done in the past.
Thank you, Graham. We have actually just 7 or 8 minutes left, and I wanted to discuss the topic of rejection. But here in the chat, I have Angelma from Ecuador with an interesting question, which I'd like to discuss a little bit. So he's talking about the situation where students apply to universities, and these universities require the decision by the student to be made in a couple of weeks whether they're going to go to this university or not. But at the same time, students are waiting for decisions from other universities. So he says, I try to work with students on the timing. Just a second, because my lines are moving. I try to work with students on the timing, but there is always uncertainty since times are not enough. So Alan and Paula, what's your approach to these situations where some universities are forcing students to reply right away, but they're still waiting and want to keep their options open? Alan?
Well, I mean, the United States, we're lucky because there's a common reply date of May 1st. So if you get into a university or a college, usually schools will give their decision by March 30th. Okay, so you still have another 30 days to make a decision. And usually in that time, students will visit schools. A lot of the universities here will have admitted student stays, so they'll have them either online or live. So by May 1st, you probably have all your ducks in a row. What I have seen is when students have to get off the wait list, they have a limited amount of time. So again, I'll tell a story. 2 years ago, I had a student who got off the wait list from UCLA, which is University of California, Los Angeles, very, very selective school. Got off the wait list on a Monday, and the school said, we need a decision by Wednesday. So basically 2 days. The student had never visited the school before and was panicking. And I basically said to the student, get on a plane tonight, go visit the school tomorrow, make a decision by Wednesday, yes or no. Sometimes what I'll even say to parents are, call the school, see if you can get an extension. These are human beings. And if they say no extension, if you're really not certain, trust your first instinct and either pull the trigger or say, I'm not really sure. I don't feel confident in saying yes to a school that's putting me under so much pressure. It's their loss.
Thank you, Alan. Paula, what is your strategy in this case?
Unfortunately, my students, they need to visit universities first. They usually arrange to visit them during vacation or holidays time. So if they get, we usually arrange universities by their top choice, second choice, third choice. So they start giving their answers according to that. So they only answer right away if they are really sure they want to go to that place. Otherwise, they don't answer and they keep waiting, mainly if they know they are going to get the place. Otherwise, they remain in the limbo. They don't know exactly what to choose. Otherwise, they get really anxious. But they usually go. They have a safe place where they apply. They know that place they are going to get, so it makes them and it's not a safe place, any kind of safe place, but a safe place that they are going to be happy. So they usually make the decision, they change their decisions based on what they have already selected, and they are going to be satisfied about.
Thank you, Paula. And I have a question a last question for Anna and Graham. We talked about this fear of students that they're going to start their life on their own and, feeling a bit maybe worried that they will be lonely and so on and so forth. So how do you think university residence halls and student service providers proactively support students in managing the emotional and social transition to independent living, especially for those international students coming from cultures with higher parental involvement? Anna, what's your intake?
Yeah, from our role as an accommodation provider, we see, as you had mentioned before, like this is a period of uncertainty, also impacts, of course, in the planning of some fundamental aspects as looking for a residence, organizing the trip, preparing visa documents. How can we help them for this trip? We can offer, for example, guidance resource. So we usually provide tools such as accommodation webinars and guides to help the student to decide what kind of environment they need. We also facilitate visits, but we always try to focus on the conversation with the student. We listen to the resident, to what concerns him, what he's looking for, what makes them feel at home. And we create the environment where the student can make like responsible decisions about their day-to-day life, developing their skills for their adult life. So also we offer like emotional and social and practical support. And we also offer like communal spaces where they can stay with another students and shares all their matters, and also the team of the resident, of course, that is always available to talk with them and to listen at the tests, like signs of emotional or overload of stress.
Thank you, Anna. And Graham, same question to you. How do you support these students?
Yeah, so obviously, as I mentioned, it can be a very daunting thing living in a university where you're not from the same city, let alone a new country. So it's really important. There is a lot of support in place. I think Anna touched on it. It's about that emotional, but also the social and the practical support is really important for students. So one thing that we're really keen to do is get current students involved with that. As a staff member, you can relay as much information as possible, but sometimes for a student who is settling into a new university in a new country, being able to engage with a current student who has been there for 1, maybe 2 years, that benefit just goes such a long way. They feel they can confide in their fellow student more. So what we have as our university, we have a residence life team. We have experienced students in their 2nd or 3rd year of study who live within those accommodation offerings, who will be there for pretty much 24/7 support with the student, organise social activities with the students and the rest of the accommodation, and essentially be that point of contact for any advice, support, help that they might need. So I think that getting students involved is really important, current students. I think it really resonates well with potentially new students, and also covering the really basic information. So we'll do kind of informative sessions before going through, how to actually walk to your accommodation. You can order bed packs and your furniture from these places, like the really basic stuff that you might not think about until you're there. And it can be quite overwhelming when you're sat in your room and you're like, okay, I've not got this, I've not got that, but that information was given to you a month ago online. So I think it's about balancing out that kind of real kind of student support with the pastoral advice from staff around those kind of practical things as well. So it's about covering all bases, being supportive and open when students do want to engage with you.
Thank you, Graham. And now, because we're at the end of the session, but I have one quick question for each one of you, a fun one. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the student. Imagine you're a student. What is the one part of the university application process that you would like to remove very quickly? Alan?
Question. The US, the activities list. Just think it's a perfect waste of time.
Okay, the activities list. Paula, what about you?
I think it becomes really bureaucratic. You have to like show off what you are. So it's almost like you have to build someone that does not exist to apply. So, and we have that idea that less is more. So maybe less paper, less activities, as Alan said. So more about student authenticity.
Thank you, Paula. Anna, what about you?
Maybe it's not something that I will remove from the application process in the university, but just to change anything. For example, in Spain, or at least in Madrid, the admission process finished very late. It's almost at the end of June. And by then, most of the residents are fully booked, or maybe some of the best room. So they are stressed because of this. So I will change, at least in Spain, these dates, and I will do it like 1 month or 2 months earlier, so they have like the facility to look for a student residence, or to start to look for a student residence before, not at the end of June or the beginning of July.
Thank you, Anna. And Graham, finally to you.
Yeah, I'd say maybe a slightly similar point to Anna. I'd say timings. I'd say um, whatever country you're applying to, whatever region you're applying to, the deadline is the exact same. Because one issue I have in the UK is that obviously, as I think Anna mentioned it earlier, the deadline in the US is a lot earlier, so students have to hold out if they are wanting to study in the UK. So if every single country had the exact same deadline, then that would make life a little bit easier.
Thank you, Graham. And my personal point of view is this is CVs. I really don't see the point of asking a student for a CV, and I hated explaining to students how to write their CV and, adding even the most mundane thing inside just to have something written on. So that was the final part for today. I'm sure that there's so many other things that we can discuss and can go way more deeper into the question, but we just have 1 hour. So thank you to all of you, our panelists today, for joining us and for spending your time, and to the attendees. Have fun during the rest of your meetings and during tomorrow's second day of the e-conference. I'm looking forward to see you all during the global session as well with our other speakers. And I'm wishing everyone a smoother, kinder, and more transparent application season ahead. Goodbye, everybody.